It didn't really begin with the invitation. No, it began earlier than that. It began with the rumor. That moment you're at the pub or in the office break room and someone leans in and says, "Have you heard? Gary and Sarah are getting married." Immediately a series of questions would fire off in your mind like a reflex. The first, of course, was always, what on earth am I going to wear? The second, a more practical concern. What do I buy them as a gift? Is a toaster still acceptable? A set of cutlery, perhaps? And the third question, the one that truly lingered deep in your subconscious, will there be a free buffet at the evening reception? Then, a few weeks later, it would arrive, a gentle thud through your letterbox, the invitation itself. It was an object of surprising weight and quality, always printed on that thick, cream-coloured card with a pearlescent sheen. It felt important in your hands. On the front, you'd find one of 3 approved symbols of matrimony: 2 interlocking gold rings, a pair of doves gazing lovingly at each other, or, if they were really pushing the boat out, a soft focus watercolour painting of a village church they had probably never visited. And the font. Oh, the font. It was always some form of swirling, looping, impossibly elaborate cursive script that was almost completely illegible. You'd have to hold it at an angle and squint, not so much reading the invitation as you were deciphering it as if it were a pirate's treasure map leading you to the wedding venue. So the invitation is on your mantelpiece and the real challenge begins. What to wear? For the men, it was simple. You'd go to a place like Moss Bras and rent a ridiculously oversized morning suit. You spend the entire day hiking up the trousers and feeling like a child wearing his dad's clothes, but your decision was made in 15 minutes. For the women, however, it was a sartorial minefield. The golden rule was almost always a pastel-coloured 2-piece suit and a hat. The hat wasn't an accessory, it was a statement. A satellite dish of felt and fake flowers that posed a genuine physical threat to anyone sitting behind you in the church. This was particularly true for the mothers of the bride and groom. They weren't just getting dressed, they were engaging in a silent, pastel-coloured arms race. A subtle war of waistcoats and wide brims played out across the aisle. Now let's talk about the main players, the bridesmaids. Oh, the poor bridesmaids. They were the sacrificial lambs on the altar of 90s fashion. Their dresses were always made of a shiny, rustling material, usually taffeta or satin, in a colour that simply doesn't exist in nature. We're talking a luminous peach, a shocking teal, a dusty lilac. The designs featured more frills, bows and puffiness than a Victorian doll's nursery, often with a giant bow on the back for reasons no one could explain. And in winter, a special kind of tragedy, they'd just make the same dress but in deep green or burgundy velvet. You'd look less like a bridesmaid and more like a sentient pair of curtains from a stately home.
And then, the bride. The dress wasn't a garment, it was a habitat. It was a piece of mobile architecture. The 80s hangover was strong and the meringue was still king. The motto was more is more. More lace, more seed pearls, more fabric. The sleeves, my God, the sleeves. They weren't just puffy, they were structurally significant with their own internal scaffolding. The shoulders were padded to the point of resembling an American football player. And the skirt, it was a dome of satin and net so vast that the bride needed her own postcode to navigate through a doorway. The veil was a masterpiece of obscurity, often held in place by a tiara that looked like it had been won at a fun fair. She didn't walk down the aisle, she sailed, a majestic, satin-clad galleon navigating the narrow channel of the church pews. So, you've made it to the venue. It was always one of 2 places. The first was a chilly but charming local church that smelled faintly of old books and polish. The second was the local registry office, an aggressively beige room with a few sad-looking plastic ferns in the corner, and an atmosphere of bureaucratic finality. If it was a church, you had the hymns. There were only 3 acceptable wedding hymns in the 90s: All Things Bright and Beautiful, Morning Has Broken, and Give Me Joy in My Heart. Everyone would belt them out, slightly off-key and a full half-second behind the organ, while secretly wondering if the pub was open yet. The vows themselves were a moment of genuine emotion, but they were always punctuated by the inescapable sounds of real life. A baby starting to cry with impeccable timing, and a distant uncle succumbing to a coughing fit that seemed to last for the entire ceremony. After the I do's and the slightly awkward first kiss, it was time for the part everyone was waiting for, the exit. This wasn't a gentle cascade of rose petals, this was an assault. Guests would be armed with handfuls of confetti made from tiny razor-sharp paper. It came in the shape of horseshoes, bells, and sometimes just baffling little rectangles. You'd throw it with surprising force, aiming directly at the face and hair. For the rest of the day, and indeed the week, the bride and groom would be finding tiny paper horseshoes in the most intimate of places. It was a glittery, papery curse.
Then came the photographs. This was a grueling hour-long ordeal commanded by a photographer named Dave, who thought he was David Bailey. He'd shout things like, "Lovely, now one with just the mums," and "Groom, look like you love her." The poses were rigid and unnatural. The entire wedding party lined up like a school photo, the bride and groom staring wistfully into the middle distance, the bridesmaids all holding their single, sad-looking carnation. While this happened, the rest of the guests stood around on a lawn, making small talk and drinking the cheapest, warmest sparkling wine known to man. This was the awkward limbo, the purgatory between the ceremony and the party. Finally, you're ushered out of the cold and into the reception venue. It was always a hotel function room. You know the one. The walls are a nondescript colour somewhere between magnolia and despair. The carpet has a swirly pattern specifically designed to hide a multitude of wine stains, and the air is thick with the smell of anticipation and industrial air freshener. On the tables are pristine white tablecloths, maybe some balloons tied to a small, heavy weight, and the centerpiece, a tall, thin vase with a single wilting flower in it. And placed on every table, the greatest technological and social invention of the 1990s, the disposable camera. A tool for capturing 27 blurry, badly framed images, 10 of which would just be a picture of someone's thumb, and one of which would be an accidental, terrifying close-up of your own face. But you're here for the food, the wedding breakfast, which was, confusingly, usually served at 3 p.m. The starter would arrive, and 9 times out of 10, it was the undisputed king of 90s formal dining, the Prawn Cocktail. Served in a sundae glass, it was a culinary masterpiece. A handful of tiny prawns swimming in a sea of pink Marie Rose sauce, sitting on a bed of shredded iceberg lettuce, and garnished with a single mournful wedge of lemon and a light dusting of paprika. The only alternative was a slice of melon, often with a glacé cherry pinned to it with a cocktail stick. That was it. That was fine dining. The main course was reliable. It was brown. A thick slab of roast beef or a chicken breast, a couple of roast potatoes that were somehow both hard on the outside and soggy on the inside, some overcooked carrots, and a Yorkshire pudding. The whole plate would be swimming in a glossy sheen of Bisto gravy. It wasn't exciting, but it was dependable. It did the job. Dessert was a straight fight between 2 titans, the Black Forest Gâteau or the Sherry Trifle. The Trifle was a layered weapon of mass destruction. Spongy fingers soaked in so much sherry you could fail a breathalyzer test just by looking at it, followed by a layer of wobbly jelly, thick yellow custard, and topped with a swirl of whipped cream and hundreds and thousands. Magnificent.
Then came the speeches. The father of the bride would stand up, tell a rambling story from 20 years ago, get a bit emotional, and welcome the groom to the family. The groom would thank everyone for coming and say how beautiful his wife looked. And then, the best man. This was the danger zone. His speech was a tightrope walk over a canyon of social embarrassment. It would be littered with in-jokes that only 3 people understood, a few borderline inappropriate stories, and would always end with a toast, just before he said something he'd truly regret. As evening falls, the room transforms. The lights are dimmed to a hazy, romantic glow. The formal seating plan is forgotten. And in the corner, a man named DJ Kev sets up his twin decks and his massive carpeted speakers. A new wave of guests arrives for the evening dew, fresh and ready for the buffet and the disco, mingling with the day guests who have now loosened their ties and kicked off their uncomfortable shoes. The night officially begins with the first dance. This was a moment of peak 90s romance. The song choice was critical, and it was almost certainly Everything I Do It For You by Bryan Adams, Love Is All Around by Wet Wet Wet, or Something Powerful by Celine Dion. The couple would sway awkwardly in the middle of the dance floor for about 45 seconds before the DJ, sensing their discomfort, would inevitably grab the microphone and shout, "Let's get everyone on the floor!" The spell was broken. And now DJ Kev is in his element. He doesn't ease you in, he goes straight for the jugular. Come On Eileen, Agadoo, the big guns. And then he'd play the songs with instructions. The Macarena, Saturday Night by Wigfield, the entire room from the toddlers to the grandmothers performing the same synchronized, slightly silly moves. It was a moment of pure, unadulterated communal joy. But the peak of the evening's dancing ritual was the holy trinity of floor-based moves. First, the conga line, weaving its way between tables and annoying people trying to get to the bar. Then the frantic, chaotic mess of the Grease megamix. And finally, the ultimate test of your knees and sobriety, oops upside your head. The entire wedding party sitting on the floor in rows, shuffling back and forth like a giant, badly dressed rowing team. Ties are now being used as headbands by the uncles. This is what it's all about. Of course, all this dancing is hungry work. Which brings us to the buffet. The 90s evening buffet, a symphony in beige, a cornucopia of culinary classics, cold sausage rolls, quiche Lorraine, sandwiches with the crusts cut off, filled with egg mayonnaise or tuna sweet corn, a bowl of twiglets, and the iconic cheese and pineapple on a stick, often jammed into a half a melon to look like a hedgehog. It was a glorious, carb-heavy feast that fueled the terrible dancing until midnight. And we can't forget the children, now hyperactive from orange squash and stolen sips of cider, skidding across the polished floor on their knees until they inevitably crashed, falling asleep on a pile of coats in the corner. As the night winds down, DJ Kev plays the last slow dance, usually to something emotional, and then one final upbeat classic to send everyone home happy. It's time for the send-off. The remaining guests, now a bit wobbly, form a human archway for the bride and groom to run through before they climb into a taxi that their friends have hilariously decorated with shaving foam and toilet paper.
And as you leave, blary-eyed and full from the beige buffet, you remember to grab the disposable camera from your table. You drop it off at Boots or Super Snaps the next week, and a fortnight later, you get the photos back. You flick through them, and most of them are terrible. A collection of blurry, red-eyed, poorly lit images, a half-eaten sausage roll, the back of someone's head, a flash reflecting off a window. But amongst the dross, there's always 1 or 2 gems. A photo of your friends laughing uncontrollably at a joke you can't remember. A candid shot of the happy couple, unguarded for just a second, looking truly happy. And that's what these weddings were all about. They weren't polished, they weren't curated for social media before social media even existed. They were a bit messy. The colors clashed, the food was simple, the dancing was ridiculous. But they were real. They were full of genuine, unpretentious joy.
They were about gathering everyone you knew and loved into one room to celebrate something wonderful, with no pressure to be perfect. It was a glorious, puffy-sleeved, prawn cocktail-fueled mess. And honestly, I wouldn't have had it any other way. So, what's your favorite memory from a 90s wedding? What essential detail did I miss? Was it the questionable fashion, the unforgettable food, or those dance moves you tried so hard to forget? Let me know in the comments below. If you enjoyed this trip down memory lane, please give this video a like and be sure to subscribe for more trips back in time. Thanks for watching.